If you tell me your name, you will change the fate of everything that lives in this city." The rain fell in heavy sheets, turning the streets into rivers of reflected light, neon signs bleeding into the pavement like broken stars. Emily Carter tightened her grip on the thin handle of her umbrella, her sneakers soaked through, each step sending a quiet splash into the silence of the late-night block. It was past 11, the kind of hour when decent people were already home and only the desperate or the powerful still moved through the city. She was neither, just tired, just trying to make it back to her apartment after another double shift that barely paid enough to cover rent. That was when she saw him. He stood at the corner beneath a flickering street lamp, perfectly still, as if the storm did not exist, as if the cold did not touch him. No coat, no umbrella, just a man in a dark suit that looked too expensive for this part of town, his face half hidden in shadow, his eyes fixed on something she could not see. Anyone else would have walked past. Everyone else had. Emily slowed, her breath visible in the cold air, something in her chest tightening in a way she did not understand. He looked wrong. Not dangerous. Not exactly. Just alone in a way that felt too deep, too quiet, like a silence that had lasted for years. She hesitated for 1 second, then stepped toward him, lifting her umbrella until it covered them both. The shift in temperature was immediate. The air around him was colder than the rain, colder than the night, a sharp chill that made her skin prickle. He turned his head slowly, and when his eyes met hers, the world seemed to pause. They were not normal eyes. Too still, too bright, like something ancient looking out through a human face. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. Emily swallowed, forcing a small, awkward smile. "You look like you needed this more than I do," she said, her voice softer than the storm. He did not take the umbrella. He did not move at all, but his gaze dropped to her hand where she held the handle, then back to her face, studying her like she was something he had never seen before. Up close, she could see details that made no sense. His skin was too pale, not sick, not weak, just absent of warmth. His breath did not fog in the air. The rain touched him, but it did not seem to cling. "Why?" he asked finally, his voice low and smooth, carrying something that felt less like a question and more like a command. Emily blinked, caught off guard. "Why what?" He stepped closer, just enough that the umbrella tilted, just enough that she felt that unnatural cold seep deeper into her bones. "Why would you help someone you do not know?" he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "When you have nothing to spare?" Her fingers tightened slightly on the umbrella handle. "Because you were standing in the rain," she answered simply. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not confusion, not anger, something far more dangerous. Recognition. Like a memory he had tried to bury suddenly clawing its way back to the surface. His hand moved, fast enough that she almost flinched, stopping just short of her wrist. The space between them felt charged, heavy, like the air before lightning strikes. "Tell me your name," he said quietly. Emily's heart skipped, an instinct she could not explain telling her to step back, to leave, to disappear into the rain and never look back. Instead, she shook her head once, gently pulling her hand away. "It does not matter," she said. Then she placed the umbrella into his hand, closed his fingers around it, and stepped back into the storm. The rain soaked her instantly, cold and relentless, but she did not look back. She did not see the way he stood there, unmoving, staring down at the umbrella like it was something impossible. She did not hear the distant sound of engines going silent across the city, or the way lights flickered as if something unseen had just shifted. And she did not know that for the first time in centuries, the most powerful being in that city had just felt something he could not control. The next morning did not begin with sunlight. It began with silence. Emily Carter woke before her alarm, her eyes opening slowly as if something had pulled her out of sleep instead of rest. The small apartment around her was exactly the same, cracked ceiling, thin curtains, the distant hum of traffic 12 floors below, but something felt different. The air was heavier, still, like the city itself was holding its breath. She sat up, rubbing her arms as a chill moved through her that had nothing to do with the weather. For a moment, she could not explain why her heart was beating faster. Then she remembered. The man in the ring. The way he had looked at her. The way he had asked for her name like it mattered more than anything else in the world. Emily let out a quiet breath and shook her head, trying to dismiss the feeling. It was nothing, just a strange encounter. People in this city were strange all the time. She swung her legs off the bed and stood, moving through her morning routine with practiced speed. Coffee. Cold. No time to heat it. A piece of toast she barely tasted. By the time she stepped out onto the street, the world should have been loud, busy, chaotic. Instead, it felt controlled. Too controlled. Black cars lined the block. Not parked randomly, but placed with precision. Men in dark suits stood at corners, their posture too straight, their eyes too alert. They were not police. They were not security she recognized. And yet everyone moved around them as if they belonged there. Emily slowed, her instincts tightening again. Something had changed overnight. She could feel it in the way people spoke softer, the way no one made sudden movements, the way the usual noise of the city seemed muted, like someone had turned down the volume of the world. As she reached the diner where she worked, she noticed the windows were already clean, the lights brighter than usual. Inside, the manager was standing straighter than she had ever seen him, his voice low as he spoke to a man Emily had never seen before. Tall, pale, still. Her stomach dropped before her mind could catch up. It was not him. Not exactly. But it was the same kind of presence. The same unnatural stillness. Emily pushed the door open, the small bell chiming overhead. Every head turned. Not all at once. Not obviously, but enough that she felt it. Eyes tracking her. Measuring her. The manager hurried toward her, his usual irritation replaced with something close to fear. You are late, he said, though she was not. His voice shook slightly. Emily frowned. I am on time. He glanced past her, then leaned closer. Just go inside. Do your job. Do not speak unless you are spoken to. The words hit wrong. Too specific. Too careful. Emily nodded slowly and moved behind the counter, her hands automatically reaching for a coffee pot. But her attention stayed on the man in the corner booth. He had not moved since she walked in. His gaze never left her. Not once. A customer at the counter tried to get her attention, but his voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. Emily forced herself to focus, pouring coffee, taking orders, pretending everything was normal. It was not. The air felt colder near that booth. The lights above it flickered slightly, just enough to be noticed if you were looking. And she was looking. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then the man in the booth lifted his hand, a single, slow motion that carried more authority than a shout. The entire room stilled. Emily felt it like a physical force, like the world itself had paused. Her manager nodded toward her sharply. Go, he whispered. Her feet moved before she could stop them. Step by step, she approached the table, her pulse loud in her ears. The man's eyes followed her, silver and sharp, not human, not even close. Coffee, she said, her voice steady despite everything. He did not answer. He only studied her face, as if comparing it to something in his memory. Then, very quietly, he spoke. He has been looking for you. Emily's breath caught. Who? She asked, though part of her already knew. The man's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. The one who now owns everything you can see, he said. His gaze flicked toward the window, toward the city beyond. Then back to her. And the only thing he does not own, he added softly, is your name. A cold wave moved through Emily, sharper than anything she had felt the night before. Outside, one of the black cars pulled to a stop directly in front of the diner. The engine did not make a sound. The door opened slowly. And for the first time since she had walked away in the rain, Emily Carter realized something terrifying. He had not let her go. The door of the black car opened without a sound, and for a moment, no one inside the diner moved. Not a plate, not a chair, not even a breath. Emily Carter stood frozen beside the table, the stranger's words still echoing in her mind. The one who owns everything, the one who is looking for you. Outside, polished black shoes touched the pavement, slow, deliberate, as if the ground itself had to accept each step before it was taken. The air inside the diner dropped several degrees, subtle but undeniable, like winter slipping through cracks no one could see. Emily felt it first in her fingers, then along her spine. She did not want to turn toward the window. Every instinct told her not to. But she did. He stepped out of the car like he had stepped out of the night itself. The same man from the rain. The same stillness. The same presence that made the world feel smaller, quieter, like everything else existed only around him. Lucien Voss lifted his gaze, and even through the glass, even from across the street, his eyes found hers immediately. No hesitation. No searching. As if there had never been any doubt. Emily's breath caught, sharp and sudden. That was impossible. This was a city of millions. There was no way he could know it was her. And yet, he did. The door of the diner opened before she realized she had stepped back. The small bell above it rang once, too loud in the silence, then fell quiet. No one greeted him. No one asked what he wanted. The manager lowered his head slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough to be seen. Respect. Fear. Something deeper. Lucien walked inside, each step measured, controlled, his dark coat untouched by the damp air outside. He did not look around. He did not acknowledge anyone else in the room. His attention never left Emily. It felt like standing in the path of something inevitable, something that had already decided its course long before she was aware of it. Emily tried to speak. She did not know what she was going to say. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But the words never came. He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him again, sharper now, more intense than the night before. For a brief second, neither of them moved. Then his eyes dropped to her hands, as if checking for something, as if expecting to see something that was no longer there. The umbrella. Gone. Given. Accepted. A line that could not be undone. You left, he said quietly. His voice was the same. Smooth. Controlled. But there was something beneath it now. Something unstable. Emily swallowed, forcing herself to meet his gaze. It was just an umbrella, she replied. You looked like you needed it. The room reacted, though no one made a sound. A shift in posture. A tightening of shoulders. The man in the booth looked down, suddenly very interested in his untouched coffee. Emily did not understand why, but she felt it. The wrongness of what she had said. Lucien tilted his head slightly, studying her like she had said something impossible. No, he said after a moment, his voice softer, more dangerous. It was not just an umbrella. He stepped closer. One step. That was all it took. The distance between them disappeared, and with it, the illusion that she could walk away again. You gave me something no one has given me in centuries, he continued, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. And then you left without telling me your name. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, loud enough she was sure he could hear it. Maybe he could. There was something about him that suggested he heard everything, saw everything, knew everything. And yet, here he was, standing in front of her like he was missing one small, critical piece. Why does that matter? She asked, her voice quieter now. Not afraid. Not exactly. Just aware. Lucien's expression shifted, not into anger, not into frustration, but into something far more unsettling. Need. Because, he said, each word precise, deliberate, it is the only thing in this city that does not belong to me. The silence that followed was absolute. Outside, cars moved. People walked. The city continued. But inside the diner, time had stopped. Emily felt it in the way no one dared to interrupt, in the way even the air seemed to wait. Lucien lifted his hand slowly, giving her enough time to pull away, enough time to refuse. But she did not move. His fingers hovered just above her wrist, close enough that she could feel the cold without being touched. Tell me your name, he said again, quieter this time, but infinitely more powerful. It was not a command. It was not a threat. It was something else entirely. Something that felt like a turning point. Like if she spoke, something irreversible would happen. Emily Carter hesitated. For the first time in her life, her own name felt heavy, like it carried weight she had never noticed before. Outside, the black car waited. Inside, the most powerful being in the city stood in front of her, waiting for an answer he could not force. And for reasons she could not explain, Emily realized something just as terrifying as him finding her. He needed her to choose. Emily Carter did not answer. The silence stretched between them, thin and sharp, like glass ready to crack. Her name sat at the back of her throat, heavy, waiting, but something deeper held it in place. Not fear. Not exactly. Instinct. The kind that whispered when something important was about to change forever. Lucien Voss did not move. His hand remained suspended near her wrist, close enough that the cold of him seeped into her skin, but he did not touch her. That alone felt wrong. Everything about him suggested control, power, the ability to take whatever he wanted without hesitation. And yet, he waited. For her. Around them, the diner remained frozen in quiet tension. No one interrupted. No one dared. Even the man in the booth had gone completely still, his gaze lowered as if looking at the floor was safer than witnessing whatever this was. Emily drew a slow breath, steadying herself. You said you own everything in this city, she said carefully, her voice calm despite the way her heart pounded. Then why does my name matter so much? Lucien's eyes sharpened, something flickering behind them that looked dangerously close to honesty. Because it should not exist outside my reach, he replied. And yet it does. The words settled into the air with weight, heavier than they should have been. Emily frowned slightly, confusion cutting through the tension. That does not make any sense. A faint shift passed through his expression. Not anger. Not irritation. Something closer to interest. No, he agreed quietly. It does not. For a moment, he looked at her as if she were a question he could not solve, something that defied every rule he had known for centuries. Then his hand moved again, slower this time, giving her every chance to pull away. This time, his fingers brushed her wrist. The contact was immediate. A sharp, unnatural cold surged through her skin, racing up her arm like ice beneath the surface. Emily gasped softly, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. But beneath the cold, there was something else. A pulse. Not hers. Not his. Something in between. Lucien froze. Completely. His fingers remained against her skin, but all movement stopped, as if the world itself had paused around that single point of contact. His eyes darkened, the silver shifting, deepening, like something inside him had just awakened. Impossible, he murmured, so quietly that only she could hear it. Emily's breath came faster now, confusion and something stranger building in her chest. What is that? She whispered. He did not answer immediately. His gaze dropped to where their skin touched, his expression tightening in a way that suggested not pain, but something far more unfamiliar. Control slipping. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled his hand back. The absence of contact felt just as sudden as the cold had been, leaving behind a lingering sensation that did not fade. Lucien took a step back. Just one. But it was enough to shift the balance of the room. The power that had pressed in from all sides loosened slightly, like a storm pulling back without fully leaving. You felt that, he said, not a question. Emily nodded once, still trying to steady her breathing. Yeah, I did. He studied her again, more intensely than before, as if every answer he had been searching for had just changed. And you are still standing, he added quietly. What was supposed to happen? She asked. Lucien did not respond right away. His gaze flicked briefly toward the others in the room, then back to her, calculating, deciding. No human should be able to touch me without consequence, he said at last. Especially not like that. Emily blinked, the words sinking in slowly. Like what? A pause. Then, with careful precision, he answered, without breaking. The weight of that statement settled heavily between them. Around them, the tension shifted again, sharper now, more dangerous. The man in the booth finally looked up, his expression no longer neutral but wary, as if he had just witnessed something. That should never have happened. Outside, another black car pulled up, joining the first. More figures stepped out, their movements synchronized, controlled, unmistakably not human in the way they carried themselves. Emily's stomach tightened. This was growing, escalating, and somehow, it was all centered on her. Lucien seemed to come to a decision. His posture straightened, the brief fracture in his control sealing over, his expression returning to something colder, more composed. But his eyes remained locked on hers. You are coming with me, he said. Not a request. Not quite a command. Something in between. Emily's head snapped up slightly. I am not going anywhere with you. The words came out stronger than she expected. For a split second, the room reacted again, tension spiking, like a line had just been crossed. But Lucien did not move toward her. He did not force her. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying her with that same unsettling focus. You already stepped into my world the moment you gave me that umbrella, he said softly. You just did not realize it. Outside, the second car door closed. Inside, the air grew colder again. And Emily Carter began to understand that whatever had started in the rain had never been something she could simply walk away from. No one spoke when the second car door closed. The sound echoed through the street like a signal, quiet but absolute. Inside the diner, the shift was immediate. The air grew tighter, heavier, as if something unseen had just tightened its grip on the entire block. Emily Carter felt it press against her chest, making each breath slightly harder than the last. She glanced toward the window without meaning to. The figures outside had spread out with unnatural precision, forming a perimeter that no one else seemed to question. People walked past them, cars slowed, but no one interfered. It was as if the entire city had already accepted their presence. As if this had always been the way things were meant to be. Emily's gaze flicked back to Lucien Voss. He had not moved. Not physically, but something about him had shifted. Subtle. Dangerous. The control he held so tightly now felt thinner, like something beneath it was pressing against the surface, trying to break through. His eyes had changed again. The silver was still there, but deeper now, threaded with something darker, something that seemed to move beneath the surface like a storm waiting to rise. He was looking at her wrist, at the place where he had touched her. Emily followed his gaze, her pulse quickening. There was nothing there. No mark. No bruise. Just her skin, slightly pale under the harsh diner lights. And yet she could still feel it. That cold. That pulse. As if something invisible had brushed against her and left behind a trace that refused to fade. "What did you do to me?" she asked quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. Lucien's gaze lifted slowly, meeting hers again. For the first time since he had walked in, there was something unmistakable in his expression. Not power. Not control. Uncertainty. "I did nothing," he said. "That is the problem." The words hung between them, heavier than anything he had said before. Behind him, one of the men from outside stepped into the doorway. Tall. Silent. His eyes flicked briefly toward Emily before lowering, a gesture of respect directed at Lucien. "My lord," the man said, his voice low, careful. "The council has been informed." A pause. Then, more quietly, "They are already moving." Emily felt the tension spike again, sharper this time, like the edge of something about to snap. Lucien did not look away from her. "Of course they are," he replied calmly, though the calm felt deliberate now, constructed. "They always move when they sense something they cannot control." The man hesitated. "This is different." Lucien's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes," he said. "It is." Emily's stomach tightened. None of this made sense, and yet every part of her body understood that she was standing in the middle of something far bigger than she had ever imagined. "What council?" she asked, unable to stay silent any longer. The man in the doorway glanced at her, then quickly away, as if even acknowledging her presence directly was dangerous. Lucien answered instead. "The ones who believe they have a say in how this city is ruled," he said. "They are wrong." His tone was soft, but the weight behind it was absolute. Final. Emily shook her head slightly. "You keep talking like you own everything. Like you decide everything. That is not how the real world works." A faint, almost invisible shift passed through the room. Not from Lucien. From everyone else. The man in the doorway went completely still. The manager behind the counter stopped breathing. Even the air seemed to hesitate. Lucien looked at her for a long moment. Then, very slowly, he turned his head toward the window. Toward the city beyond. Cars. Buildings. People moving through their lives, unaware of the conversation happening inside this small diner. "That is exactly how it works," he said quietly. "You just have never been close enough to see it." He turned back to her, his gaze locking onto hers with renewed intensity. Until now. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but the sound of something breaking cut her off. A glass near the counter shattered without warning, the pieces scattering across the floor. No one had touched it. No one had been near it. The room went completely still again. Then another sound followed. Not inside. Outside. A low hum. Growing. Building. Emily's eyes flicked toward the window again, her breath catching as she saw what was happening. The streetlights were flickering. One by one. Not randomly. In sequence. Moving down the block like a wave of darkness rolling toward them. The figures outside shifted, their posture tightening, their attention snapping toward the far end of the street. Something was coming. Something that even they were preparing for. Lucien's expression hardened, the brief trace of uncertainty disappearing beneath something far colder, far more dangerous. "They are early," he said softly. Then his gaze returned to Emily, sharper than ever. "Which means we do not have time." Before she could react, before she could step back or speak, his hand moved again, faster this time, closing around her wrist with firm, controlled pressure. The cold surged through her instantly, stronger than before, stealing the breath from her lungs for a split second. But this time, she did not flinch. And that alone made his grip tighten slightly. Not to hurt, to confirm. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice low, commanding, but threaded with something else now. Urgency. Outside, the streetlights went dark all at once. And whatever had been coming finally arrived. Darkness swallowed the street in a single breath. One moment the city was dim, controlled, holding itself together by fragile threads of light. The next, everything outside the diner fell into shadow, as if someone had erased the world beyond the glass. Emily Carter felt Lucien Voss's grip tighten around her wrist, not in panic, but in calculation. His body shifted slightly, placing himself between her and the door without breaking eye contact with the street. The figures outside moved instantly, their formation tightening, their attention locking onto the far end of the block where the darkness seemed thicker, heavier, like it carried weight. Emily could not see what was coming, but she felt it. A pressure, deep and unnatural, pressing against her chest, making the air harder to draw into her lungs. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lucien did not answer immediately. His eyes had changed again, the silver now streaked with deep crimson that pulsed faintly, like embers beneath ash. "Opposition," he said finally. "And they should not have come this close." The words had barely left his mouth when the first figure stepped into view at the edge of the darkness. Then another. Then more. They did not walk like normal people. Their movements were too smooth, too synchronized, like they were all connected to the same silent command. Black coats, pale faces, eyes that reflected no light. Emily's breath caught as they stopped just beyond the invisible line where the diner's weak lights reached. None of them crossed it. Not yet. The man who had spoken earlier from the doorway stepped closer to Lucien, his voice lower now, edged with tension. "They are not hiding," he said. "They are making a statement." Lucien's expression hardened. "Yes," he replied. "They are." For a moment, neither side moved. The diner became something else entirely, no longer a place for food or conversation, but a boundary. A line between two forces that had been building toward this moment long before Emily had ever stepped into the rain the night before. Emily swallowed, her mind racing, trying to understand what she was seeing. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice steadier now despite the fear coiling in her chest. Lucien's gaze did not leave the figures outside. "They believe power should be shared," he said. "They believe I have had too much of it for too long." Emily frowned slightly. "And you think they are wrong?" A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Not warm, not kind, just certain. I know they are wrong." The air shifted again. One of the figures outside stepped forward, crossing into the faint edge of light. A woman, tall, elegant. Her dark coat moved like liquid around her, untouched by the wind that Emily could now hear rising beyond the block. Her eyes locked onto Lucien, then flicked briefly to Emily. That single glance felt like a blade sliding across her skin. Measuring, assessing. "You brought her into the open," the woman said, her voice carrying easily through the glass without raising in volume. "That is unlike you." Lucien did not respond immediately. His grip on Emily's wrist loosened slightly, but he did not let go. "You should not be here," he said instead, his tone calm, but edged with something sharper now. "You know what this means." The woman's gaze sharpened. "We all felt it," she replied. "The moment you touched her." A ripple passed through the figures behind her, subtle but unmistakable. Emily's heart skipped. They felt it. Whatever had happened between her and Lucien had not been private. It had echoed. "That is not your concern," Lucien said. "Everything you do is our concern," the woman countered smoothly. Her eyes returned to Emily, colder this time, especially when it involves something that should not exist. Emily's breath caught. "I am right here," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The woman's gaze snapped fully to her, and for the first time, something like surprise flickered across her face. Then it disappeared, replaced by something darker. Interest. Yes, she said softly. You are. The temperature dropped again, sharper now, biting through the air like ice. Lucien stepped forward slightly, placing himself more firmly between Emily and the door, his presence expanding, pushing outward like an invisible force. The lights above them flickered once, then steadied, as if struggling to hold against something far stronger. Leave, he said, his voice low but absolute. Before this becomes something you cannot walk away from. The woman did not move. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him, then Emily, as if weighing something unseen. It already has, she said quietly. Behind her, the figures shifted again, their posture tightening, ready. The line had been drawn. The silence broke not with a shout, but with a single step forward from one of the figures behind her. And in that moment, Emily Carter understood something with terrifying clarity. This was not just about power. It was about her. And whatever she was, it had just become the center of a war she never knew existed. The moment that single step was taken, everything changed. It was not loud. It was not chaotic. It was precise. The figure that moved did not rush, did not attack, did not even raise a hand. And yet the air inside the diner snapped tight like a wire pulled to its limit. Emily Carter felt it in her bones, a sudden pressure that made her knees weaken for just a fraction of a second. Lucien Voss reacted before anyone else. His grip on her wrist shifted, not tighter, but anchored, as if he was locking her in place against something unseen. His other hand lifted slightly, fingers barely moving, and the entire front window of the diner shuddered as if struck by an invisible force. The glass did not break. It held, but the message was clear. This was a boundary, and crossing it would not be simple. Outside, the woman's expression did not change, but the figures behind her stopped instantly, their movements freezing mid-step as if a command had been issued without sound. The tension did not ease. It sharpened, focused. You are overstepping, Lucien said, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that pressed outward like a storm held in check. This is my city. The woman's gaze did not leave him. It has always been your city, she replied. That is the problem. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Emily again, slower this time, more deliberate. And now, you are making it about her. Emily felt that look like a physical thing, like being pulled into something she did not understand. Her pulse quickened, her instincts screaming that she should step back, hide, leave. But Lucien's presence behind her, beside her, held her in place, not by force, but by something harder to resist. Certainty. She is not your concern, Lucien said. The woman's lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but into something colder. Everything that destabilizes you is our concern. The word hung in the air. Destabilizes. Emily's mind caught on it immediately. That was what this was. Not just interest. Not curiosity. Something about her had disrupted him. The most powerful man in the city. The one they all feared. The one who owned everything. She had done something to him. And now they were here because of it. A second figure stepped forward beside the woman, taller, broader, his eyes fixed on Lucien with open challenge. We felt it across the entire network, he said. A break. A fracture. Something that should not exist. Lucien's expression did not shift, but Emily felt the cold around him intensify, sharper now, more controlled. Then you should have stayed away, he replied. The man's gaze flicked toward Emily, assessing, calculating. Or perhaps, he said slowly, we should remove the cause. The words landed like a blade. The room reacted instantly. The man in the doorway moved without hesitation, stepping fully inside, his posture shifting from passive to ready. The others behind the counter froze completely, their fear no longer hidden. Emily felt her stomach drop. Remove the cause. They were talking about her. Lucien moved then. Not fast, not sudden, but absolute. He stepped forward, placing himself directly between Emily and the door, his presence expanding outward in a way that made the lights flicker again. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the space itself was bending around him. You will not touch her, he said. No raised voice. No visible anger. Just certainty. The kind that did not leave room for negotiation. Outside, the figures shifted again, their formation tightening, but none of them crossed the line. Not yet. The woman studied him carefully, something new in her expression now. Not defiance. Not fear. Recognition. You are already choosing, she said quietly. Lucien did not answer. He did not need to. It was obvious. The man beside her let out a low breath, shaking his head slightly. All this, he said, gesturing toward the diner, toward the city beyond, for a human who does not even understand what she is. Emily's breath caught again. What she is, not who. What? The words echoed in her mind, louder than everything else. She took a small step back without thinking, her shoulder brushing against the counter behind her. I am right here, she said again, her voice stronger this time, cutting through the tension. You can stop talking like I am not. The man's gaze snapped back to her, sharper now, more focused. For a moment, something like curiosity replaced the cold calculation. You should be afraid, he said. Emily swallowed, her heart pounding, but she held his gaze. Maybe I am, she replied. But that does not mean I am going to stand here and let you decide what happens to me. The silence that followed was different. Not just tension. Something had shifted. Subtly, but enough. Lucien's hand tightened slightly around her wrist, not to restrain, but in acknowledgement. He had heard her, and so had they. The woman outside exhaled slowly, her eyes narrowing just slightly. This changes things, she said. Yes, Lucien replied quietly. It does. Another pause. Then the woman stepped back. Not in retreat. In decision. This is not over, she said. Not even close. Lucien did not move. It never is. The figures behind her shifted again. Then one by one, they began to step back into the darkness, their forms dissolving into shadow as quickly and quietly as they had appeared. The pressure in the air did not disappear. It lingered, like a promise, or a warning. Emily let out a breath she had not realized she was holding, her body still tense, her mind racing. She turned slightly, looking up at Lucien. What just happened? She asked quietly. Lucien's gaze remained fixed on the darkness outside for a moment longer. Then he looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Now, he said, his voice low, steady, they know you exist. And the way he said it made one thing painfully clear. That was only the beginning. The silence left behind did not feel like relief. It felt like the moment after thunder, when the air still vibrated with what had just passed. Emily Carter slowly pulled her wrist from Lucien Voss's hand, not abruptly, not in defiance, but because she needed to feel where she ended and he began. The cold lingered even after the contact was gone, a faint echo beneath her skin that refused to disappear. She looked toward the door, toward the street that had returned to normal in the most unnatural way possible. Cars moved again. People walked past. The streetlights flickered back to life as if nothing had happened. As if a line between two worlds had not just been drawn in front of this small diner. Emily let out a slow breath, then turned back to him. They said I destabilize you, she said quietly. What does that mean? Lucien did not answer immediately. His gaze followed the last trace of movement outside, ensuring the figures were truly gone. Only then did he look at her again. It means, he said carefully, you are something that should not be possible. Emily frowned, shaking her head slightly. I am a waitress who works 2 jobs and barely pays rent. There is nothing impossible about that. A faint shift crossed his expression again, something almost human, almost familiar. That is what you believe, he said. It is not what you are. Before she could respond, the manager suddenly rushed forward, his composure finally breaking. You need to leave, he said urgently, his voice low but strained. Both of you. This place cannot handle this kind of attention. Emily blinked, startled by the sudden intrusion of normal fear into something that had felt anything but normal. What attention? She asked. The manager stared at her like she had just asked why the sky was blue. Do you not see what just happened? He whispered. Do you not understand who is standing in front of you? Emily glanced at Lucien again, then back at the manager. No, she said honestly. I do not. The manager's face paled further, if that was even possible. He opened his mouth to say something else, then stopped, his eyes flicking to Lucien, waiting, afraid to continue without permission. Lucien did not acknowledge him. His attention remained fixed on Emily, as if the rest of the world had already been dismissed. You cannot stay here, Lucien said. Not anymore. Emily crossed her arms slightly, a defensive motion she did not fully realize she was making. You keep saying that like it is not my decision, she replied. It is my job, my apartment, my life. A brief silence followed. Then Lucien stepped closer again, not invading her space, but closing the distance enough that she could feel the shift in the air between them. It was, he said. The past tense landed harder than anything else he had said so far. Emily's stomach tightened. What is that supposed to mean? He held her gaze, steady, unwavering. The moment they saw you, he continued, everything you had before became a liability. Emily felt something twist in her chest. Not fear this time. Anger. So what? She said, her voice rising slightly. I just walk away from everything because a group of people in black coats decided I am a problem. Lucien's expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened. They did not decide you are a problem, he said. They realized you are power. The word hit differently. Power. Not victim. Not target. Something else. Something that carried weight. Emily shook her head again, more forcefully this time. You keep talking in circles. You have not actually explained anything. Lucien exhaled slowly, as if measuring how much he could say. Because the explanation will not make your situation better, he said. It will only make it more dangerous. Before Emily could respond, the bell above the door rang again. Not softly, not like before. This time it snapped through the room, sharp and sudden. A man stepped inside, dressed like any other customer, but everything about him was wrong. His posture, his stillness, his eyes. They locked onto Emily immediately. The manager froze again, his fear returning in an instant. The man did not look at Lucien. Not at first. He walked forward, slow, deliberate, stopping just a few feet away from Emily. Then he spoke. You should come with us, he said, his tone calm, almost polite. Emily stared at him, her pulse quickening again. I am not going anywhere, she replied. The man's gaze flicked briefly toward Lucien, then back to her. You misunderstand, he said. This is not a request. The air shifted again, tension snapping back into place, sharper than before. Lucien moved instantly, stepping between them without hesitation, his presence cutting off whatever the man had been about to do next. You are bold, Lucien said quietly. Walking in here alone. The man did not step back. I am not alone, he replied. Outside, the street changed again. Not darkness this time. Movement. Shadows gathering at the edges, just out of sight. Emily felt it before she saw it. They had not left. They had only repositioned. The man in front of her tilted his head slightly, studying her with unsettling calm. You do not understand what you are carrying, he said. But you will. Emily's heart pounded, her instincts screaming again, louder now, more urgent. She glanced at Lucien, then back at the man. And if I do not go with you, she asked. The man's expression did not change. Then this city will not be safe for you anymore. The words settled into the air like a final warning. And for the first time, Emily Carter realized something even more dangerous than before. This was no longer just about being found. It was about being claimed. Lucien Voss did not step aside. He did not hesitate. The moment the man finished speaking, something in the air shifted so sharply that even Emily Carter felt it without understanding what had changed. It was not movement. It was dominance. Invisible. Absolute. The temperature in the diner dropped again, but this time it did not spread evenly. It centered on Lucien, radiating outward like a controlled storm. The man in front of them stiffened slightly, not enough for a normal person to notice, but enough for Emily to see it now that she knew what to look for. You have made your point, Lucien said, his voice calm, almost quiet. Now leave. The man's gaze flickered, not toward the door, but toward Emily again, as if weighing the risk, calculating the outcome. You cannot protect her from all of us, he replied. Not forever. Lucien took one step forward. Just one. And the entire room reacted. The lights dimmed, not flickering this time, but bending, as if something heavier than electricity was pulling them down. The glass on the counter vibrated softly, a low hum building beneath the surface of the silence. I do not need forever, Lucien said. I only need now. The words landed with finality. Not a threat. A fact. The man's expression hardened slightly, but he did not retreat. Not yet. You are choosing her over the balance, he said. Over the order we have maintained for centuries. Lucien's gaze did not waver. The balance was never yours to maintain, he replied. You were allowed to exist within it. The shift was immediate. Outside, the shadows moved again, faster this time, reacting to something unseen, something that had just been decided. Emily felt her pulse spike, her instincts screaming louder than before. This was no longer a warning. This was escalation. The man in front of her exhaled slowly, as if coming to a conclusion. "Then this is where it begins," he said. Lucien did not respond. He did not need to. The answer was already written in the way he stood, in the way the air itself seemed to align with him. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Then, finally, he stepped back. One step. Enough to break the immediate tension, but not enough to signal retreat. "We will not stop," he said. "Not until we understand what she is." His gaze shifted to Emily one last time, colder now, more focused. "And neither will you," he added quietly. Then he turned and walked toward the door, his movements controlled, measured, as if nothing had just happened, as if the weight of the moment did not follow him out into the street. The bell rang again as he left, sharp, cutting through the silence. Outside, the figures that had gathered began to disperse once more, not disappearing this time, but pulling back, melting into the movement of the city like shadows returning to their places. The pressure in the diner eased, but it did not vanish. It lingered, heavy, like a storm that had only paused. Emily let out a breath she had not realized she was holding, her hands trembling slightly now that the immediate danger had stepped back. She looked up at Lucien, her mind racing, trying to catch up to everything that had just happened. "You just made this worse," she said quietly. Lucien did not deny it. "Yes," he replied. The honesty of that answer hit harder than anything else. Emily shook her head slightly, her frustration breaking through the fear. "So what now?" she asked. "They come back with more people. Stronger. And I am just supposed to what? Stand behind you and hope you can handle it." Lucien turned to face her fully, his expression unreadable, but his eyes sharper than before, more focused, as if something had solidified inside him. "No," he said. "Now they hesitate." Emily frowned. That did not look like hesitation. A faint shift crossed his expression, something almost like dark amusement. "They came expecting uncertainty," he said. "They found none." He stepped closer, not invading, but closing the distance enough that his presence felt intentional, deliberate. "That changes everything." Emily searched his face, trying to understand, trying to find something human in the way he spoke, something she could hold on to. "You said they think I am power," she said. "What does that actually mean?" Lucien's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, then sharpened again. "It means," he said carefully, "that whatever you are, it affects me in ways nothing else can." Emily's breath caught again, not from fear this time, but from the weight of that statement. He was not guessing. He was certain, and that certainty was what had just forced an entire group of powerful beings to step back instead of forward. Outside, the city continued as if nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. Lucien's hand lifted slightly again, not touching her this time, but hovering near her wrist, as if he was resisting the instinct to confirm what he already knew. "You asked what happens next," he said quietly. Emily nodded, her pulse still uneven. He held her gaze, steady, unwavering. "Now," he said, "you stay with me." The words were simple, but there was nothing simple about what they meant. Not protection, not just that. Possession, alignment, a line being drawn that could not be undone. Emily felt it settle over her, heavy, real. "And if I do not?" she asked. Lucien did not hesitate this time. "Then they will take you," he said. "Or worse." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that had not been said, everything that was still coming. And for the first time, Emily Carter understood the true weight of the choice in front of her. This was not about leaving or staying. It was about which side of a war she was going to survive. Emily Carter did not answer immediately. The weight of his words settled into her chest, heavy and unavoidable, like something that had already chosen her before she ever had a chance to choose it back. Stay with me, or be taken, or worse. The options did not feel like options at all. She let out a slow breath, her fingers curling slightly at her sides as she tried to steady herself. "You keep saying things like that," she said quietly, "like everything is already decided." Lucien Voss watched her without interruption, his gaze steady, unreadable. "Some things are," he replied. "But not this." Emily shook her head slightly, frustration rising again. "Then explain it to me," she said. "Not in pieces. Not in warnings. Just tell me what is actually happening." For a moment, he did not answer. The diner around them had begun to move again, cautiously, as if the people inside were trying to return to normal without fully believing it was safe. The manager avoided looking at them entirely. The man in the booth had already left. Even the air felt like it was pretending nothing had just happened. But Lucien did not pretend. His attention remained fixed on her. "You touched me," he said finally. "And nothing broke." Emily blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of it. "You already said that." "No," he replied, his voice lower now, more precise. "I said you did not break. That is not the same thing." A faint tension coiled in her chest. "Then what is?" Lucien's gaze dropped briefly to her wrist again, as if the answer was written there in a language only he could read. "There are rules," he said. "Ancient ones. Bound to blood, to power, to what we are. When those rules are broken, there is always a consequence." Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with his presence. "And what rule did I break?" His eyes lifted back to hers. "You were not affected by me," he said. "And I was affected by you." The words settled into place slowly, each one heavier than the last. Emily frowned, trying to understand. "So what? I am just immune to whatever you are." Lucien's expression sharpened slightly. "No," he said. "If you were immune, I would feel nothing." A pause. Then, quieter, more deliberate. "But I do." The admission hung in the air, charged, dangerous. Emily's breath caught, not because she understood it, but because of the way he said it. Not like a confession. Like a problem he could not solve. "That is what they felt," he continued. "Not you. Me." Emily's mind raced. The council. The reaction. The sudden appearance of those figures in the street. It had not been triggered by her existence alone. It had been triggered by his response to her. "So they are not just afraid of me," she said slowly. "They are afraid of what I do to you." Lucien did not correct her. "Yes." The simplicity of that answer sent another wave of tension through her chest. Emily looked away for a moment, her thoughts spiraling, trying to find something solid to hold on to. "And what does that mean?" she asked quietly. Lucien did not hesitate this time. "It means you are connected to something I have not felt in centuries," he said. "Something that was supposed to be gone." Emily's eyes snapped back to his. "Gone how?" A flicker passed through his expression. "Not pain. Not quite. But something older." "Destroyed," he said. The word landed hard. "Final." Emily swallowed, the weight of it settling in. "So you think I am connected to something that was destroyed?" She repeated. "That is your explanation." Lucien's gaze held hers. "It is not a theory," he said. "It is the only explanation that fits." Silence stretched between them again, but this time it felt different. Not just tension, something deeper. Something that reached beyond the diner, beyond the city, into something older, something buried. Emily exhaled slowly, shaking her head once. "This is insane," she muttered. "Yesterday, I was worried about rent. Now you are telling me I am somehow tied to something ancient and destroyed." A faint shift crossed Lucien's expression again, something almost like understanding. "That is how it begins," he said quietly. Emily let out a short breath, almost a laugh, though there was no humor in it. "And how does it end?" Lucien did not answer right away. His gaze flicked briefly toward the door, toward the city beyond, as if measuring something unseen. Then he looked back at her, his expression settling into something colder, more certain. "It does not end," he said. "It evolves." The word sent a quiet chill through her. Outside, the street continued as normal, but Emily no longer believed in normal. Not after what she had seen. Not after what she had felt. She looked down at her wrist again, half expecting to see something there now. Some mark, some sign that all of this was real. There was nothing. And yet, everything had changed. Lucien's voice cut through her thoughts again, softer now, but no less serious. "You asked for the truth," he said. "That is part of it." Emily looked back up at him, her expression tightening slightly. "And the rest?" A brief pause. Then, slowly, deliberately, he said, "The rest is what happens when they realize you are not just connected to something that was destroyed." His eyes held hers, unwavering. "You might be the reason it comes back." The words settled into the space between them, heavier than anything that had come before. And for the first time, Emily Carter felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not confusion, something else, something she could not name. But whatever it was, it had just made her more dangerous than she had ever been before. Emily Carter did not speak after that. The words lingered in the air, heavy and final, as if they had unlocked something that could not be pushed back into place. You might be. The reason it comes back. She stared at Lucien Voss, searching his face for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that he was exaggerating. There was none. That was what unsettled her the most. Not the danger. Not the impossible explanation. The certainty. The diner around them no longer felt like a place she belonged. It felt smaller now, temporary, like a fragile space caught between something much larger. Emily exhaled slowly, her gaze drifting to the window again. The city moved like nothing had changed, but she could feel it beneath the surface. Watching. Waiting. So what happens now? She asked quietly. Lucien did not answer right away. His attention shifted slightly, not away from her, but outward, as if he was listening to something beyond the walls, beyond the street. His eyes narrowed just a fraction, calculating. Now, he said, they will not wait. The words sent a subtle chill through her. Meaning they will stop testing boundaries, he replied, and start removing them. Emily's stomach tightened. You mean me? Lucien looked back at her. Yes. There was no softness in that answer. No attempt to ease it. Just truth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emily shook her head once, grounding herself. Then we leave, she said. Right now? Before they come back. Lucien studied her carefully, something shifting in his expression again. Not surprise. Recognition. That is the first logical thing you have said, he replied. Great, she said under her breath. I am glad I am finally catching up. A faint shadow of something almost like amusement flickered in his eyes, then disappeared just as quickly. You are not catching up, he said. You are adapting. The word felt more accurate than she wanted it to. Emily glanced around the diner one last time, her gaze lingering on the counter, the worn floor, the small details that had made up her routine just hours ago. It already felt distant, like something from a different life. She turned back to him. Then what are we waiting for? Lucien did not answer. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence shifting again, more focused now, more contained. Stay beside me, he said. Do not fall behind. Emily frowned slightly. I am not planning to. He did not respond to that. His attention had already moved to the door. Without another word, he turned and walked toward it, his movements smooth, controlled, as if nothing outside could possibly stop him. Emily hesitated for a fraction of a second, then followed. The bell above the door rang as they stepped out into the street, but this time, it sounded different. Louder, sharper, like a line being crossed. The air outside was colder than before, the city's usual warmth replaced by something thinner, more fragile. Emily felt it immediately, her instincts tightening again. The black cars were still there, but fewer now. The figures that had stood watch earlier were gone. Or hidden. That did not feel like safety. It felt like preparation. Lucien did not slow. He moved down the sidewalk with quiet precision, his gaze scanning the space ahead, not openly, but with awareness that made Emily realize he was tracking far more than she could see. She stayed close, matching his pace, her senses heightened, every sound sharper, every movement more noticeable. Where are we going? She asked quietly. Away from here, he replied. That is not an answer. It is enough for now. Emily pressed her lips together, resisting the urge to argue. Something told her that right now, arguing was not the priority. Staying close was. They reached the black car parked closest to the curb. One of the men from earlier stepped forward, opening the door without a word. His eyes flicked briefly to Emily, then lowered again, respectful, but not curious. That alone told her everything she needed to know. He had already been told who she was. Or what she was. Emily hesitated for a fraction of a second before stepping inside. The interior was quiet, controlled, like everything else surrounding Lucien. He followed immediately, the door closing behind them with a soft, final sound. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The car began to move, smooth and silent, merging into the flow of traffic as if it belonged there more than anything else. Emily looked out the window, watching the city pass by, but it did not feel the same anymore. Every reflection, every shadow, every passing figure felt like something that could be watching her back. This is not over, she said quietly. Lucien's gaze shifted to her, steady, unwavering. No, he replied. It has only begun. The words settled into the space between them, heavier than anything before. Emily leaned back slightly, her eyes still on the city outside, her mind racing, trying to process everything that had changed in less than a day. She did not know where they were going. She did not know what she was becoming. But one thing was clear. There was no going back. And somewhere in the distance, beyond what she could see, something else had already started moving in response. The city outside the window blurred into streaks of light and shadow, but Emily Carter no longer saw buildings or traffic. She saw patterns, movement, gaps where something could hide. Every reflection in the glass felt like it might be watching her back. The car moved smoothly through downtown, then gradually away from it, the streets growing wider, quieter, less crowded. Lucien Voss sat beside her, completely still, his presence filling the space without effort. He had not spoken since they left the diner. That silence felt deliberate, not empty, controlled. Emily finally shifted her gaze from the window to him. "You said this started because I touched you," she said quietly, "and because you felt something you were not supposed to feel." Lucien did not look at her immediately. His eyes remained forward, tracking something beyond the windshield, something she could not see. "Yes." Emily studied him for a moment, then asked the question that had been building since the diner. "What did you feel?" That made him pause. Not physically, but internally, like something in him had to decide whether to answer. Slowly, he turned his head toward her. His eyes were no longer just silver. There was something deeper in them now, something warmer, something far more dangerous. "Something I lost a long time ago," he said. Emily's brow furrowed slightly. "That is not an answer." A faint shift crossed his expression. Not irritation. Something closer to restraint. "It is the only answer that matters." The car slowed slightly as it turned onto a long, tree-lined road. The city noise faded further behind them, replaced by a quieter, heavier silence. Emily glanced outside again, noticing the change. Fewer buildings. Larger spaces. Isolation. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere they cannot reach you easily," Lucien replied. "Easily," she repeated under her breath. That does not sound very reassuring. He did not respond to that. Instead, his attention returned fully to her, his gaze steady, almost searching. "Why did you do it?" he asked. Emily blinked. "Do what?" "The umbrella," he said. "You saw something that was not normal. You felt the cold. You saw that I was not like everyone else. And still, you stepped closer." Emily looked away for a moment, considering that. The memory felt distant now, like something that belonged to a different version of herself. "I do not know," she admitted. "You looked alone." The word hung between them. Alone. Something in Lucien's expression shifted again, subtle but undeniable. Not weakness. Not vulnerability. Recognition. "I have been alone for a very long time," he said quietly. Emily turned back to him, surprised by the tone of his voice. It was not cold. Not distant. Just honest. "Then why does that matter now?" she asked. "You have probably met thousands of people." Lucien's gaze held hers. "None of them stepped closer," he said. "None of them gave anything without expecting something in return." Emily let out a small breath, shaking her head slightly. "It was just an umbrella." "No," he said again, softer this time. "It was not." The car slowed further, then turned through a set of tall iron gates that opened without a sound. Beyond them, a long driveway stretched forward, lined with dark trees that blocked out the remaining light of the city. At the end, a structure emerged. Large, elegant, isolated. It did not look like a home. It looked like something older, something that had been there long before the city had grown around it. Emily's chest tightened slightly as the car came to a stop. The door opened, and the man from earlier stepped back, waiting. Lucien did not move right away. His gaze remained on her, steady, unreadable. "Once you step out of this car," he said quietly, "you do not go back to what your life was before." Emily felt the weight of that settle in, not as a threat, as truth. She looked toward the open door, then back at him. "I do not think I can go back anyway," she admitted. Lucien studied her for a moment longer, then nodded once. Not approval. Acknowledgement. "No," he said. "You cannot." Emily took a breath, then stepped out of the car. The air outside was colder than anywhere else she had been that day, sharp and still, carrying a silence that felt deeper than normal quiet. She looked up at the structure in front of her, then back at Lucien as he stepped out beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world felt distant, contained, like everything that mattered had narrowed down to this single place. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Lucien's gaze shifted briefly to the house, then back to her. Now, he said, you learn what you are. The words sent a quiet ripple through her chest. Not fear. Not exactly. Something else. Anticipation. Or maybe inevitability. She nodded once, almost without realizing it. And as they stood there in the silence, something deeper than either of them moved beneath the surface. Not seen, not heard, but waiting. And whatever it was, it had just come one step closer to waking. The heavy doors closed behind Emily Carter with a deep, final sound that echoed through the vast hall, sealing her into a world that did not belong to her. Or perhaps, as Lucien Voss had said, a world she had always been meant to enter. The air inside the estate was different. Colder, yes, but also older. The walls seemed to carry something unseen, something that had witnessed centuries of silence, power, and secrets that were never meant to be spoken aloud. Emily stood still for a moment, her eyes adjusting to the dim light, her senses sharpening without her permission. Every sound felt louder, every movement clearer. Even her own heartbeat seemed to echo through the space in a way it never had before. Lucien stepped past her slowly, his presence shifting as he crossed into the center of the room. Here, he did not blend into the shadows. He controlled them. Come, he said quietly. Emily followed, her footsteps soft against the polished floor, her gaze drawn forward to a raised platform at the far end of the hall. Symbols covered the stone beneath it, intricate, ancient, carved with a precision that suggested purpose rather than decoration. As she stepped closer, something inside her reacted. Not fear, not pain, recognition. She stopped abruptly, her breath catching as a faint warmth spread through her chest, completely out of place in the cold air. Do you feel it? Lucien asked, his voice low. Emily nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the symbols. Yes. The word came out almost as a whisper. Lucien turned toward her, his expression more serious than she had seen before. Then it is real, he said. Emily tore her gaze away from the floor, looking at him. What is real? Lucien held her gaze, steady, unwavering. The thing they thought was destroyed, he said. It was never gone. The words settled into her, deeper than anything else had so far. Emily felt the warmth in her chest pulse once, stronger this time, like something answering him. And it is connected to me, she said quietly. Lucien did not hesitate. Yes. Silence stretched between them, but it was not empty. It was full of something building, something rising just beneath the surface. Emily took a slow breath, then stepped forward onto the platform without waiting for permission. The moment her foot touched the carved stone, everything changed. The symbols beneath her feet ignited with a soft golden light, spreading outward in a perfect circle. The air shifted instantly, the cold retreating, replaced by a warmth that did not belong to the room, did not belong to the night, did not belong to anything she had ever known. Emily gasped softly, her body reacting as the warmth moved through her, not burning, not hurting, but awakening something that had been silent for far too long. Lucien did not move. He watched, completely still, his eyes fixed on her as the light grew brighter, reflecting in his gaze. Not red, not silver, gold. For the first time since she had met him, his control faltered completely. It is you, he said, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. Emily looked down at her hands as the light traced along her skin, not marking her, but revealing something that had always been there. The pulse in her chest grew stronger, steady, powerful, no longer unfamiliar. It felt right. What does that mean? She asked, her voice unsteady. Lucien stepped forward slowly, stopping just at the edge of the platform, as if crossing into the light required something he was not yet ready to give. It means, he said, each word deliberate, you are not just connected to what was lost. He paused, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made everything else fade. You are the source of it. The light surged once more, then settled, not disappearing, but stabilizing, becoming part of her rather than surrounding her. Emily took a breath, deeper this time, steady, grounded. The fear that had followed her. Since the diner was still there, but it had changed. It no longer controlled her. She lifted her gaze to meet his. So what happens now? She asked. Lucien stepped closer, this time crossing into the edge of the light without hesitation. It did not reject him. It did not harm him. It simply acknowledged him. That alone was enough to confirm everything. He reached for her hand again, slower than before, giving her time, giving her choice. Emily did not pull away. Their fingers met, and this time, the cold and the warmth did not clash. They balanced perfectly. Lucian exhaled softly, something in him finally settling after centuries of silence. Now, he said quietly, the city does not just belong to me. His gaze softened, just slightly. It belongs to us. Emily looked at him, then at the light beneath her feet, then back at the world beyond the walls that had once been hers. Everything had changed, but for the first time, she did not feel like she was losing something. She felt like she had found it. And somewhere far beyond the estate, the forces that had been watching, waiting, realized something with terrifying clarity. The balance had not been broken. It had been rewritten.